Alright, so first make sure you follow the directions on Canvas and that you have downloaded this Notesheet PDF. And then you should be sitting on the Cami tools so you can fill in this note sheet along with me. I'm going to go over this with you now. I've already written the first one. This unit is about energy use and release in the context of photosynthesis and cell respiration. ATP has 3 parts. It is our energy molecule. We're going to label that on the sheet first. This first structure that is connected together is called adenine. It is then bonded to this house symbol in the middle. It's 5-sided, so that's usually going to be a sugar. Sugar is called ribose. Notice that O's ending is for sugar. Then you have these 3 circular structures that are bonded at the end. Those are the 3 phosphates. These bonds are the easiest ones to break, and that is how ATP releases energy, is by breaking that bond. It can then store the energy by getting that bond back. So this is the cycle that occurs. It goes from ATP, it loses a phosphate, so we lose a phosphate to become ADP, and then we can also gain a phosphate through cell respiration to become ATP again. So it is a cycle going back and forth. Photosynthesis is a process of taking ATP from the sun, using it to turn it into ADP. And then ADP creates ATP using cell respiration. So on the bottom here, you're going to take this explanation and just overall describe what happened between 1 and 2. What happened from here to here? How did ATP become ADP? What happened? And then this question, between 2 and 1, how did ADP become ATP again? What occurred? So you will answer that question there. On the next page, I have a leaf, kind of zoomed into the leaf to try to show everything that's occurring inside of it. What you're going to be doing is explaining each separate line or step. So I have labeled 1 is when the sunlight comes in and hits. I've drawn this chloroplast that's inside of a leaf. So you're tracking the sunlight hitting this location of the chloroplast. Also down here you see water that's coming in through the roots into the leaf to the same location. So sunlight is coming in, and the sunlight hitting this location is energy. Sunlight is energy. So in the process it's creating ATP. So that's 1, sunlight hitting the location and creating ATP. You're just going to explain that here using those words. Number 2 was where the water comes in through the roots, through the stem, and goes up to the leaf. So it hits the same location and it creates this hydrogen ion that's given off. Where did the hydrogen come from? Well, it comes from the H2O. So the hydrogen is split from the oxygen. The ion is given off here. And then a byproduct or waste product is oxygen. So that is process number 2 that you would explain here, is how the water comes up through the roots, hits the chloroplast in this location, and it splits into a hydrogen ion that's given off and oxygen that's given off. That's number 2. The third one is in green. You have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is absorbed by the plant. It goes into the chloroplast. One thing that's given off from that is sugar. Sugar is C6H12O6. So the C and the O obviously come from the carbon dioxide. But where did the H come from? It comes from right here, in this ion that was given off. So that will combine with the CO2 to create sugar. Sugar moves down the plant, down the leaf, and it can be stored right here as starch or any other complex molecule. So that is what you will summarize here on step number 3. Now we're going to zoom into that chloroplast a little more on this side. And we're going to start with the light-dependent reaction. Obviously that's meaning that this reaction is dependent on the light and the sunlight that hit here. So input number 1 is the sunlight going into the chloroplast to this particular location called the thylakoid. So these little disc looking things are the thylakoid. After that goes through, the first output from that is the ATP, because the sunlight has energized the chloroplast, creating ATP. That is energy. So you would explain that here, what energy change occurs from input 1 to output 1. So through this to create this ATP, how did ATP get created? The next question says, what energy change occurs from input 2 to output 2? So you would look, here's input 2, that is our water. The water comes in, of course we know now that it comes through the roots and it hits that same location. One of the hydrogens leaves and goes this way, so that hydrogen ion goes that way, leaving us with the oxygen byproduct that we've just gone over. So that is what you would explain here, what energy change occurs from input 2, from water, to output 2, explaining how this hydrogen ion comes off of the water, leaving us with oxygen, and that is to output 3. Because oxygen is the only waste product that's left after the hydrogen leaves. So now we're going to move to the other side of the chloroplast. That's the light-independent reaction. It's also called Calvin cycle, after the scientist who figured all this good stuff out. You will also hear it called the dark reaction, because there's no sunlight involved with this side of the chloroplast. That all happened over here, and so this is the dark side. Calvin cycle. What energy change occurs between input 1 and output 1? Well, the input 1 is carbon dioxide. That is absorbed by plants, and it cycles through this part of the chloroplast. From that, we get our sugar. So that's C6H12O6 glucose. So that is what you would explain here. CO2 got rearranged into C6H12O6. Where did the H come from? Well, that came from what we just went over in the sheet before it. That was the ion that left the water. So that's where we could kind of put in here again, because this is what left before. You had the ATP that came in from this side, and you had the hydrogen that left the water. So now those are going to be new inputs to the dark side. They're going to be cycled through internally. So the H comes in, combines with the CO2 to become C6H12O6. That's where glucose comes from. So that's what you would explain here. Why are inputs 2 and 3 necessary for production of this glucose? Well, that is because we didn't have hydrogen and CO2. We had to have the hydrogen to get this particular combination. The energy had to be supplied for any chemical process to occur. So that's why you would have to explain right here. To finish filling this out, ATP is used, and so that becomes ADP. That's part of our cycle that we talked about. Here, the hydrogen goes in, and we have actually lost it on this side. This is going to be an electron carrier. I think we're going to just leave that blank for now. So you will use that to describe this. We're going to go into this little comment. Glucose is a chemical energy that bonds together to store energy as starch. And that's what this little side is talking about. One glucose can bond with another one and make bigger molecules like starch. A potato would be an example of stored up starch. So on this next page is your job to go back and look at everything that was said before this and just summarize using these steps, using the words that were on the pages before to summarize how did photosynthesis transform or change light energy, the sun, into chemical energy, which is sugar.